other mortals. Before moving to the subject of this video, I would like to show you something. 3 days ago, I made the new song Tears of the Fallen Nephilims. I recorded it in Bode Museum in Berlin, while being surrounded by the medieval Christian art. It was an amazing experience. I didn't release any new music online for a long time, and I would be really appreciated if you gave it a listen. It's not a big deal for you, but it would be very awesome for me. Link is in the description below. Thank you in advance. Now let's talk about the main topic, which is why we're all gathered here. Underground. There is no term in art more abstract and mysterious. It's been interpreted in so many ways that if you ask 10 people what is the underground, you'll get 10 different opinions. It's because people have very romanticized, mysterious and even religious view of the underground. In this video, I would like to describe what defines the underground. Who am I to tell what the underground is and what isn't? Well, it's my blog, and here I'll express only my opinion, and you don't have to agree with me if you don't want to. I've been doing music since 2012. During these 10 years, I released a lot of music in different genres, and as a listener, I discovered a lot of different artists and music genres. I don't want to sound pretentious, but as you see, it's not my first day in music, so I have some experience that my own opinion is based on. I also didn't see anyone else who tried to make clear and established definition of the underground art and what makes it different from the mainstream art. Seems I'll be the first, so let's start. First of all, to understand what underground actually is, we need to draw a separating line between the underground and the mainstream. What makes the underground different? Many people would say it must be something lo-fi, scary, dark, released only on cassettes, etc. If an artist made a public appearance instead of staying in his bedroom and play music only for a bunch of people, then he becomes sold out. Not true anymore. In my opinion, it's a very superficial perception of the underground. Here comes the first question. Should an artist stay unpopular to be underground? I think not. The amount of audience does not define an artist's underground status. Let's imagine that you are making pop music, but you lack audience. Will you be considered underground because of it? No, you would still be a pop artist, despite being unpopular. I think an artist can belong to the underground scene even while being widely popular. I know for some people it's hard to digest, but hear me out. Here are some more examples to support my claim. Erik Satie, good enough example. Is he worldwide famous? Yes. Can he be considered an underground artist? Sure, yeah, why not? He was not popular when he was alive, because back then people didn't understand his music. He was too ahead of his time. He had the idea of the furniture music, where a bunch of simplistic notes were played repeatedly. Now it seems like I'm describing any music that is made nowadays. But back then people were spoiled by Mozart's and Beethoven's complex music and didn't want to accept Satie's minimalism. When Erik Satie was alive, he was poor and mostly played his music in the pubs. But it's not what made him underground. It was his creativity that was misunderstood by many. Let's take other examples of the underground artists beyond music. Why not? Nietzsche and Schopenhauer. Are they widely popular? Yes. Can they be considered underground because they invented the new, less idealistic ways in philosophy, but at the same time didn't get the wide recognition during their lifetimes? Yes. Those two philosophers are underground. How about H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe? They're the underground in literature because their writing style and ideas were overlooked by people in the beginning, and for them it took some time to be recognized. I could give even more examples, but those are plenty enough for you to understand my point. What defines the underground stages if not the amount of audience? Good question. I think the core of any underground art, not only music, is the content. The underground scene allows artists to express ideas and views that are not accepted by the masses for different kinds of reasons. The underground art takes its origins in the Renaissance era when the authority of the Catholic Church weakened in Europe, so people started creating art that goes beyond the Christian taboos. Composers started experimenting with tones and dissonances. They also added a tritone interval that was forbidden by the church and was called the devil's tone. Folk and street musicians became more active than ever before. Same was with other kinds of Renaissance art. For instance, painters and sculptors started depicting pagan gods and antique historical figures on their works. All of the mentioned stuff was still illegal, but the artists outsmarted the church and did it right under its nose. Here comes another question. Is underground art supposed to be extremist and break the taboos? Not necessarily, but it can be that way. Many underground musicians are underground because they are expressing such kind of views that might get them in trouble if they express them openly. There is a Moroccan experimental one-man project, Abu Lahab, whose leader lives in the Muslim country and prefers to stay anonymous because of the dark and nihilistic content of his music. Another example, all Western far-right music is underground because of the ideology it promotes. Often it's very challenging to find the songs by some RAC or NSBM bands because it's not allowed for the public view. If talking about the underground art beyond music, we can easily remember what happened to the avant-garde painters in the Third Reich and the Stalinist USSR. They were publicly humiliated, arrested, and their works were called the degenerate art. It's all because they depicted something that contradicted the totalitarian ideology. I think the underground should allow artists to express their ideas that might not be accepted by the mainstream. What about the form? How important is it for the underground? It is very important because the idea must be delivered somehow, right? If the form of the delivery is mediocre, then the content will be in it like in a marshland. Italian futurist artist Luigi Russolo defined modern-day underground music in his 1913 manifesto, The Art of Noises. There he told that during the prehistoric times the world was quiet, but with the technological progress it will become noisier. In the future, noise will be such an everyday thing that it will be considered another kind of music. This is how he unintentionally predicted industrial, punk, noise, black metal, etc. I think the underground artists need to discover unique forms of delivery and go where no one else would. This is why the form matters. Are lo-fi and DIY aesthetics belonging to the underground? Yes, but not exactly in the way most people think. There are so many modern musicians who are trying to make music like their favorite artists from the 80s and 90s with an analog lo-fi sound, and it looks like a cheap imitation. They just don't understand that those artists used a lo-fi and DIY aesthetics not to show off, but because they had no other choice. Unfortunately, underground scene is often very low budget, so artists must use all the resources they have in their disposal. It's interesting in a way because the limited amount of resources allows them to create masterpieces from scratch and discover peculiar ideas that didn't exist in the nature before. At the same time, the art doesn't have to be lo-fi or noisy if an artist doesn't want it to be that way. There are many mainstream indie, rock and electronic musicians who are using the lo-fi aesthetics. Can they be considered underground? I don't think so. Should underground music be minimalistic or complex? Is perfectionism good or bad? It works both ways. Some artists don't chase the skill and perfection, just do stuff the way they can and feel fine about it. Others are trying to make music so complex that no major artist would dare to copy them. It depends on the situation, and both ways have their advantages. And now I'd like to touch the subject, which is the last but not least, in the context of the underground. What's more important, art itself or a person behind it? Should you separate art and an artist? How important an artist's life experience for his art? I think art and the artist should not be separated because they are equally important. Art comes from the mind of the person behind it. At the same time, art physically cannot be created without the outer influence of the life experience. Ideas and inspiration are not taken from the void. Many artists don't understand it, and that's why there is a huge problem with the modern underground music. People are making the same cookie cutter stuff over and over again. This is what I would recommend to such kind of musicians. Stop always sitting in your boys' room. Stop thinking that opening the Google search will make you know everything. Go out to the streets and please, stop making the same generic, safe, toothless and uninspiring abstractions about Tolkien and Dungeons and Dragons. Don't take me wrong, I don't want to tell people how to make their art, but trust me, your life experience will significantly improve your creativity. Even if you won't create anything new by the form, you'll definitely create something new by the content. I can tell about my own personal life experience that inspired me a lot during my late teenage years. When I was 16, 17, my friends and I enjoyed visiting different abandoned buildings in our town. I especially remember one huge concrete building that we visited regularly. It was a very atmospheric place. It was pretty dark and silent. There were lots of graffiti. The lower levels of the building were flooded. My friends and I went there like guests, because besides us there were bats on the lower levels and birds on the higher ones. I've never seen so many bats in my entire life. Their nests were in the darkest and least accessible corners of the building, but I could hear them squeaking and moving. When it was dark, the bats were flying around the building and their high-pitched screams were everywhere. I even remember when I tried to enter the building, one of the bats flied over my shoulder and touched my face with its wing. Fortunately, it didn't try to attack me, and I wasn't hurt, but it was super disgusting. I'm not fucking with you. This is the true story. Back then, I visited many different abandoned buildings. Often, I wrote graffiti in some of them, because I was a graffiti writer back then. That industrial tourism experience kind of inspired me to start making dark ambient music. I also did the cover art and the music video for my first dark ambient song, Breath of Dark Dimension, in one of the concrete buildings that I visited. Now you see, life experience is very important for any kind of art, not only the underground art. What kind of music would I recommend as an example of the underground music? Here is my brief list of the albums that fit in that category. First, Pirrah by Dvar from 2002. Second, Zmet by der Golem from 1999. Claustration by Vomir from 2007. 4. Hamas Arc by Muslimgauze from 1993. Chance meeting on a dissecting table of a sewing machine and an umbrella by Nurse with Wound from 1979. Thank you for watching. If you have an opinion about the underground, leave a comment. Would be interesting to read it. Press like and subscribe to my channel to help it grow. You can also check out my music on my other YouTube channels and Bandcamp. All links are in the description below. Farewell, stay out of hell.